I still remember the first night Light got sick. The house was quiet. Just the gentle hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old wood settling into the cold. Outside, the wind pushed softly against the windows, and the sky hung heavy with clouds that swallowed the stars. It was the kind of night you'd forget, if not for what followed.
Earlier that evening, everything had felt normal. I had finished folding laundry and was sipping lukewarm tea while Light sat cross-legged on the living room rug, humming to himself as he arranged his toy animals into strange, precise circles. The TV played some nature documentary at low volume, its soft narration about bioluminescent jellyfish filling the silence in the room. He was so focused, tongue slightly poking out, as he placed each tiny zebra and elephant in just the right spot. "Looks like a meeting," I said, smiling. He looked up and grinned. "They're planning a parade." I laughed, genuinely. It had been a good day. We had talked to David, my husband, on FaceTime that afternoon. He was working another stretch overseas. It had been 4 weeks since he left, and while I missed him, we'd gotten used to the rhythm. I made it a point not to let Light feel that absence too much. We kept busy. We cooked together. We took walks. We built blanket forts in the living room when the weather turned. After dinner, I gave him a bath and read 2 chapters of Howell's Moving Castle, which he insisted was way better than the movie. I tucked him in with his favorite blanket, the blue one with tiny white rockets, and kissed his forehead. His skin felt warm, not enough to panic, but enough to notice. "You feeling okay, bud?" I asked.
He shrugged. "A little tired."
"Want me to stay close tonight?" He nodded. I pulled the extra comforter from the closet and set up camp on the floor next to his bed, my head propped on a couch pillow, and one arm stretched toward his mattress. He fell asleep quickly.
I didn't. His breathing was steady, but I could hear it change in the early hours. His breathing grew shallow and uneven. I leaned up and touched his forehead again, now alarmed by the heat radiating from his skin. It had risen significantly. Too much. Too fast. I carried him to the bathroom, splashed his face gently, and gave him a dose of children's Tylenol. He didn't protest, just leaned his head against my shoulder and muttered something I couldn't understand. I laid him back down, placing a cool washcloth across his forehead. I didn't go back to the floor. I sat upright in the rocking chair, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, counting each breath as if I could anchor him to the world with my attention. Outside, the wind picked up. The old oak tree scraped softly against the side of the house. That was the first night I felt it. Not saw, not heard, just felt. An uneasiness, like the air had thickened without warning. It wasn't in the room exactly, but it hovered nearby, pressing at the edges of my awareness, low and constant, like the feeling you get when someone stares at you from a dark hallway. Not in the room exactly, but near it. Like the house had tilted slightly. Like something was leaning in from the edges of the dark. Curious but patient. I stood and walked to the hallway, stretching my arms, trying to shake the tension. My joints cracked from being still too long. The thermostat read 72. But the air felt colder than it should have. I chalked it up to lack of sleep. Back in Light's room, he stirred. He mumbled something again, this time a little louder. I leaned in. "What was that, honey?" He didn't open his eyes. There's more shadows now. A chill danced up my spine. I tucked the blanket tighter around him and kissed his temple. "Go back to sleep," I whispered.
Light's features softened, and his breathing deepened as his body relaxed. Within moments, his eyelids fluttered shut, and he drifted off to sleep, his hand still curled loosely against the blanket. I sat down in the rocking chair again, wrapping the comforter around my shoulders. I didn't move for the rest of the night, and I didn't sleep, not because I wasn't tired, but because something in that room felt like it had decided to stay. By morning, Light's fever hadn't broken. He was sluggish, his voice smaller than usual, but he managed a smile when I brought him toast with strawberry jam. He barely touched it. His appetite was always strong, so even that felt like a warning sign. I called the pediatrician and got the usual advice. Keep him hydrated, monitor the fever, give him medicine every 6 hours. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent. But something felt off. It wasn't just the fever. It was the way he kept staring past me when I spoke, like he was listening to something else. Something quieter. Something I couldn't hear. When I asked if he wanted to lie in my bed and watch cartoons, he nodded without a word. I tucked him in and turned on the TV, leaving the volume low. He didn't even glance at the screen. His eyes stayed fixed on the far wall, wide and glassy, like he was waiting for something to emerge from it. I checked his temperature again, still high. I pressed a cool rag to his neck and sat on the edge of the bed, brushing hair from his forehead. "Sweetheart," I said, "you're going to be okay." He blinked slowly but didn't answer. That afternoon, I tried to nap while he rested. My body was exhausted, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw a shadow that wasn't mine. Tall, unmoving, watching from behind my eyelids. At one point, I woke up with my chest tight and my throat dry, gasping for air, unsure if I'd actually fallen asleep or just drifted into something darker. That night, the unease returned like it had never left. It was in the corners again, coiled up behind furniture, stretching along the ceiling. There was no sound, but I felt it everywhere. Like a pressure beneath the skin, dull and steady, like being watched through fogged glass. I stayed in bed next to Light. He had grown too warm again, his little body radiating heat. His breathing was quick and shallow. Around 2 a.m., I felt it happen. My eyes opened, but I couldn't move. I was on my side, facing Light, but I couldn't reach him. My arms refused to respond. My chest was compressed, my breath short and weak. Panic climbed into my throat, but it had nowhere to go. I couldn't scream. Couldn't even blink. And then, I saw it. In the mirror across the room, just beyond the foot of the bed, something was sitting on top of me. It had a body, humanoid in outline, but far from human. Its limbs were too long, its joints jagged and wrong, and its back arched in a grotesque curve. Spikes jutted from its spine and shoulders, sharp and uneven like splinters of obsidian. Its skin was the color of wet ashes, stretched thin over twitching muscle, and its head hung low, as if sniffing for something. Though it had no visible mouth, I could feel its hunger, radiating off it in waves, a sick, greedy need that made my chest seize beneath its weight. It wasn't touching me, but I felt it pressing into my chest, as if it weighed more than it should. My lungs burned. My body trembled, but still wouldn't move. It watched me through the glass. I stared into the mirror, desperate to look away, to wake up, to scream, to run. But I was trapped in my own body, a prisoner in my skin. Then Light shifted in his sleep. Just a small movement. A twitch of his arm, the sound of his breath catching. The pressure vanished. The figure was gone. My limbs released all at once. I gasped, rolling onto my back,
grabbing at my chest like I could dig the air back in. Sweat soaked through my shirt. My vision blurred from the rush of movement and fear. Light slept on, undisturbed. I sat there in the dark, staring at the mirror. Nothing moved. But I didn't sleep again that night. I didn't tell anyone what happened the next day. Because even as my hands trembled while brushing Light's hair, even as my stomach twisted when I looked at the mirror, even as the bags under my eyes deepened with each passing hour, I still thought it might have just been a dream. The next day blurred by like static. I kept going through the motions, feeding Light, giving him medicine, checking his temperature. But it all felt distant, like I was performing someone else's life. I couldn't stop thinking about the thing in the mirror, the weight on my chest, the way it had looked down at me, like it already owned me. Every time I passed a reflective surface, bathroom mirror, microwave door, even the dark screen of the turned-off TV, I flinched. I kept expecting to see it there waiting. But I didn't. Not during the day. Light's fever remained stubborn, hovering just high enough to worry me, but low enough that I couldn't justify rushing him to the ER. He seemed quieter than usual, but not scared. Not weak. Just still. In the late afternoon, I sat beside him on the couch while he dozed off with his head in my lap. I brushed my fingers through his hair, gently untangling the fine strands. He stirred once and mumbled, "It doesn't like being near me." I froze. "Who doesn't?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Light didn't answer. He was asleep again, deep and undisturbed. That night I tried calling David. It had been nearly a week since we spoke, and I needed to hear his voice. He picked up on the second ring, his image filling the phone screen. He was sitting in a hotel room, dressed in a white undershirt and looking tired but happy to see me. "Hey, beautiful," he said. "How are my two favorite people?" I smiled, though it felt weak. "Light's still running a fever," I said. "But we're managing." His brow furrowed. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm just tired, you know how it is." He nodded. "You've got this. You always do." The sound of his voice was enough to loosen something tight in my chest. For a few moments, the house didn't feel so cold. The shadows didn't press so close. We didn't talk long. He had an early morning, but I was glad I called. That night, I brought Light into my room. His fever had risen again, and I didn't want him sleeping alone. I tucked him beneath my blanket and kept a cool rag on his forehead. I lay next to him, listening to his breathing. It was just past 1 a.m. when I felt the shift. The room went still in that unnatural way, where air stops moving and the darkness feels like it's thickening around the edges of your vision. I opened my eyes. I couldn't move again. This time I was flat on my back, and the demon was there, closer now. It wasn't sitting on my chest. It was crouched above me, its spiked limbs splayed on either side of my body, its head tilted just inches from my face. Its skin pulsed faintly, like something writhed beneath it, and I could feel its breath. Cold and dry, like the air inside a crypt. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. It opened its mouth, or maybe it split, because the center of its face peeled back to reveal rows of tiny, needling teeth arranged like a tunnel. They didn't bite. Not yet. But they hovered just above my skin, vibrating with hunger. And then it began to lower itself. It was going to feed. A sound rose in my throat. A strangled, wordless cry that never reached the air. The demon leaned in farther,
Its head lowered until its jagged open maw hovered inches from my face. It inhaled deeply, and I felt something inside me respond, like a thread being pulled from the center of my chest.
A faint glow emerged from my skin, strands of pale light drifting upward into the creature's open mouth. As it fed, something darker, oily and shifting, seeped from its body in return. The shadows poured into me through my eyes, my nose, my mouth. I felt it settle in my bones. I felt it twist. Tears spilled from my eyes, not from pain, but from helplessness. The demon hovered for a moment longer after feeding. It didn't seem satisfied, but something made it pause. Its head tilted, spikes twitching, as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear. Then, with a low hiss, it peeled itself away. Its limbs creaked and flexed as it backed off, reluctant but purposeful. It retreated toward the corner of the room, shadows bending unnaturally around its form. Without a sound, it dissolved into the dark beside the dresser. No exit. No door. Just gone. The moment it vanished, my body relaxed all at once. I gasped, lungs seizing like they'd forgotten how to work. My limbs trembled as sensation returned. I rolled onto my side and looked at Light. He was still fast asleep. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his cheeks flushed with fever, one hand resting loosely near his mouth. I reached for him but stopped short, not wanting to wake him. He looked peaceful, finally resting without stirring, and for the first time in hours that gave me a small sense of comfort. Whatever else was happening, at least he was still sleeping soundly. I stayed there shivering beneath the blankets, hollowed out and afflicted by something I didn't understand. An emptiness pressed against my ribs, spreading like frost. Beneath it, a tight coil of anxiety twisted through my chest, sharp and lingering as if something inside me had been taken. And in its place, something darker had settled. The next morning came too soon. Light was still asleep when I got out of bed, and for a moment I just stood there in the doorway, watching his small chest rise and fall in the early light. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was a cold pressure behind my eyes and a pulsing throb in my temple. I moved through the motions of the morning, pouring cereal, checking my phone, tossing laundry into the washer. But everything felt wrong. Every sound grated. Every movement dragged. I dropped a spoon while unloading the dishwasher, and the clatter against the tile made me flinch hard. My hand trembled as I picked it up. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. When I looked in the hallway mirror, my reflection startled me. My eyes were sunken. My skin looked gray. The corners of my mouth twitched as if trying to form a scowl. Later, as I was folding the last of the laundry, I crouched beside the couch where Light was curled up beneath a blanket. We were low on medicine, and I'd realized we were almost out of the yogurt and crackers he could keep down. I didn't want to leave him, but he needed what I didn't have in the house. "I'm going to run to the store, okay? I'll be quick," I whispered. He nodded slowly without opening his eyes. The short drive to the store felt heavier than it should have. I parked in a half-empty lot, took a breath, and stepped inside. The overhead lights felt too bright, the air too cold. In the checkout line, someone cut in front of me without noticing. Or maybe they just didn't care. They muttered something about being in a hurry. I snapped. "Seriously? You think your time matters more than anyone else's?" I barked. The man turned, blinking. "I didn't mean..." "Just pay attention," I hissed, heart pounding in my throat. His expression twisted into a mix of confusion and pity. He stepped back, said nothing, I paid quickly and left, hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. On the drive home, the adrenaline wore off fast, replaced by a sinking weight. What the hell was that? That wasn't me. I didn't get like that. Not over something so small. But I had. And I didn't know how to explain why. But the thought didn't leave. It circled me in silence. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the tension in my jaw had settled into something more disturbing. A faint pulse of agitation that didn't belong to me. I carried the grocery bags inside, set them on the counter, and caught sight of a knife left out from the night before. A new thought cut through me. If I dropped that knife point down, would it go clean through my foot? I blinked, backing away from the counter as if I should be scared of the knives themselves. This wasn't me.
I checked on Light before putting away the groceries. He was still curled on the couch, eyes closed, breathing steady. I touched his forehead gently and brushed back his hair. He didn't stir. In the kitchen, I unpacked what I had bought. Bananas, yogurt, crackers, more medicine. I prepared a small plate for when he woke up and left it on the counter.
As I wiped down the kitchen table, my thoughts began to drift. Without this, without the illness, without the weight of care, what would my life look like? I imagined quiet mornings alone, a clean house, no one tugging at my sleeve or waking me in the middle of the night. I imagined sleep. I imagined silence. I imagined being free. The thought unsettled me. Then another followed it, colder and more specific. What if he stayed sick forever? What if I never got myself back? What if I didn't want to keep doing this?
I froze.
I stared at my reflection in the microwave door. My face looked warped, stretched slightly by the curved surface, and for a second I didn't recognize myself. This wasn't me. Light was my life. I loved him. I had wanted him. I had chosen him. But something inside me, something foreign and festering, was beginning to talk louder than I was comfortable with.
And I didn't know how to make it stop.
I smiled back, but my face felt stiff when I did it. If these nights didn't stop, I wasn't sure who I would become. That night, the thought of sleep filled me with dread. I sat in bed with the lights on, the TV playing some muted nature documentary I couldn't follow, and my body wrapped in a blanket I didn't remember pulling over myself. The exhaustion was there, pressing behind my eyes, heavy in my limbs. But I didn't let myself close them. Not fully. Every time they started to droop, I jerked awake, heart already pounding, convinced something was moving just beyond the edge of the light. Around 2:30 a.m., the house shifted. It wasn't sound or motion exactly. It was a feeling, like the walls had inhaled and were waiting to exhale. And then it came. I didn't see it enter. One moment I was staring at the edge of the doorway. The next it was there. The demon. It stood taller tonight, more solid than before. Its silhouette shimmered like heat rising off pavement, spikes casting long, sharp shadows against the wall. Its head swayed slightly like it was listening to a tune only it could hear. I tried to move, but my limbs didn't respond. Terror bloomed in my chest like ice water flooding warm skin, a helpless, trapped kind of fear I hadn't felt since childhood. Sleep paralysis again. It crossed the room without sound, without effort. Its long arms bent at angles that felt wrong, like they belonged to something crawling instead of walking. It climbed onto the bed and straddled me slowly, as if savoring the act. The weight of it settled over me, crushing and deliberate. Its face hovered inches above mine, and I saw the place where its mouth had been split open. Now more like a gash or wound than a mouth at all. Inside it, something pulsed faintly. I wanted to scream, to fight, but I couldn't. Then, the demon spoke. Not aloud, inside me.
A voice like old metal dragged across stone.
You make such a soft vessel. I felt tears slide from my eyes. The demon leaned forward, and its jagged face brushed mine. It inhaled.
The same light that had drained from me before began to flicker beneath my skin, pulled upward through my ribs like thread through a needle. My chest burned. My limbs trembled.
Then something else came. Slower. Colder. A shadow seeped from the demon and pressed into me. It was like smoke, but heavier. Conscious. It didn't just fill the space I had lost. It replaced it. Just as I felt myself slipping further, a soft sound stirred the room. Light stood in the hallway. He blinked sleepily, rubbing his eyes. His small form was silhouetted by the hallway light, his head tilted slightly as if he wasn't entirely sure what he was seeing. The demon froze. Its head twisted unnaturally to look at him. Light said nothing. He simply stared. Then quietly, he padded to the side of my bed and looked at the demon crouched on top of me. His eyes were still heavy with sleep.
He looked at the creature and asked in a soft, almost curious voice, "Is that your friend, Mommy?"
The word stabbed at me. My mind screamed to protect him, to tell him to run, to pull him away, but I still couldn't move. The demon turned toward him slowly, as if recognizing a threat too late. I tried to answer, but I couldn't make a sound. Light didn't wait. He raised one small hand and slapped the air like swatting a bug. Blades of invisible force, like claws of light, carved through the demon from the direction of Light's fingertips. He let out a strangled hiss that vibrated through the walls, then shattered apart. The pieces didn't fall. They burned out mid-air, curling into nothing. The pressure on my chest lifted instantly. I gasped. A sensation returned to my limbs. Light turned to me and climbed gently onto the bed. He wrapped his arms around me. The warmth that flowed from his body was immediate. Radiant. It spread through me like sunlight against frost, burning away the shadow that had taken root inside me. I let out a broken sob as I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by the relief, the awe, the terrifying realization that my son had just saved me from something I couldn't even understand. The tension finally broke, and exhaustion crashed over me like a wave. I pulled Light closer, letting his warmth anchor me.
Still holding him, I drifted into sleep. Deep, dreamless, and peaceful. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid.
It was the best sleep of my life. I woke up late the next morning, sunlight pouring through the curtains like a promise. For a moment, I didn't move. My body felt normal. No weight pressing down, no cold shadow under my skin, just warmth. Light was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, humming to himself like nothing had happened. He looked up from his cereal and smiled. "Morning, Mommy." "Morning," I said softly, my voice thick. I moved to the sink, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on my face. The reflection in the window didn't look as hollow anymore. I sat across from him, watching him closely. "Light, do you remember anything from last night?" He looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. "You were scared," he said simply. "That thing was being mean." My breath caught. What? What did you do? He thought for a second, then shrugged. I made it go away. Like when I wave at the bugs on the window and they fly off. I stared at him, stunned by the ease in his voice. There was no fear, no confusion, just calm certainty.
Did someone teach you that? I asked. Light shook his head, calm and unconcerned, then crunched another spoonful of cereal. No, I just do it when I have to.
I nodded slowly, heart pounding. Whatever had happened last night, Light had protected me, and he didn't even realize how powerful he was. I watched him quietly as he returned to eating, letting the silence stretch. Then I stood and walked slowly down the hallway, the reality of what he'd said settling deep in my bones. Later, as I folded laundry and tidied up toys, I caught myself listening for whispers that weren't there. I opened the bedroom door slowly, half expecting to see something waiting in the shadows. But it was just a room.
The fear hadn't vanished, not completely. But it was quieter now, like something distant. That night, as I tucked Light into bed, I found myself lingering at his door. He yawned, already drifting off. "Mommy?" he mumbled. "Yeah, baby? Are you gonna be okay now?" I swallowed. "Yeah," I said. "I think I will." And for once, I truly believed it.